February 1944. Over Rabaul, a single dive bomber drops out of the sun following a flight path no one authorized. For compass turns, each leg measured in seconds. No other aircraft in the squadron descends this way. Japanese gunners acquire him immediately. They track the dive, adjust their lead, open fire, and then lose him. They correct again, only to find empty sky where the aircraft should be. The pilot pulls out at barely 300 feet. Bomb on target. No hits. No damage. When he lands, his wingmen are angry. His commanding officer is worse. He is given 60 seconds to explain why he ignored every doctrine he was ever taught. The Solomon Islands are unforgiving places to fight a war. The sun turns aluminum skins into cooking plates by midday. Sweat dries into white salt crusts on flight suits before engines cool. Jungle heat rots metal and men with equal indifference. In early 1944, the Allied advance inches northward through a chain of islands that most Americans could not locate on a map, but were expected to die for anyway. Rabaul, Caving, Truk. Each one a fortress. Each one defended by soldiers who did not believe surrender was an option. This is not the air war of Europe. There are no contrails braided across blue skies, no altitude buffers between pilots and consequence. In the Pacific, dive bombing is intimate. You go low. You see faces on the ground. You smell cordite, burning oil, and sometimes something worse. The jungle does not conceal the dead. It displays them. Dive bombing is mathematics written in gravity. At 8,000 feet, the pilot rolls inverted. He pulls through until the target locks into the reflector sight, then commits to a 70-degree plunge. The aircraft becomes a falling equation. Engine screaming. Control surfaces shuddering. The ground rushing upward in a narrowing tunnel. At 2,000 feet, the bomb is released. The pullout costs 4, 5, sometimes 6 GS. If you hesitate, the jungle reaches you before the elevators can respond. And from the moment the dive begins, someone below is trying to kill you. Japanese anti-aircraft doctrine is disciplined and precise. Crews do not spray blindly. They plot trajectories, calculate lead, and walk their fire into the predicted path of the aircraft. A bomber in a steady dive presents a solvable problem. By early 1944, those solutions are being applied with devastating consistency. Losses are not catastrophic, but they are relentless. Enough to hollow out squadrons one aircraft at a time. Enough that pilots who survive 4 missions begin to think hard about the 5th. Enough that maintenance crews stop learning names. In ready rooms, there is an unofficial term no report ever uses. Attrition arithmetic. Marine Scout Bombing Squadron 236 operates from a coral strip on Bougainville that floods when it rains and bakes solid when it doesn't. Their aircraft are SBD dauntless, reliable, honest, slow. They forgive mistakes once, rarely twice. Corrosion is constant. Spare parts are theoretical. Every aircraft flies longer than it should. Most pilots fly exactly as trained. Standard approach altitudes. Standard dive angles. Textbook pullouts. Most of them die that way too. James Harlan Sweat does not fit the mold of a legend. Born in Seattle, raised in San Mateo, California, he comes from a family that values discipline without cruelty and achievement without arrogance. He is quiet, observant. He watches systems rather than people. In high school, he is a competitive swimmer. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but obsessively efficient. He wins by removing waste. That habit follows him into aviation. He is not a natural stick. He does not fly with poetry. He flies with causality. Stick input produces airspeed change. Airspeed produces descent rate. Every consequence is logged mentally. He earns his wings in early 1942, squarely average by training standards. He requests fighters and is assigned dive bombers instead. The Dauntless suits him. By late 1943, flying in the Solomons, Sweat realizes something most pilots learn too late. Doctrine is written by survivors, not experimenters. And the enemy adapts faster than manuals can be revised. Japanese gunners are not static variables. They learn. If you dive the same way every time, you become predictable. And predictability is just another word for target. Sweat begins thinking the way he always has, about systems, about patterns, about whether the choice between accuracy and survival is a false one. What if confusion could be engineered? Not chaos, which kills pilots as efficiently as it kills enemies, but controlled unpredictability. something that looks erratic from the ground, yet remains stable from the cockpit. Between missions, he sketches an idea. For turns, for legs, each timed precisely. A segmented descent that breaks tracking solutions without breaking bombing geometry. He calls it the four-step dive. Everyone else calls it impossible. The tactical manuals offered no answers. Pilots could vary approach altitude. That worked once, sometimes twice, until the gunners recalculated. They could attack from a different cardinal direction, but the defenses adapted faster than new habits could form. Some tried shallower dives, 45 degrees instead of 70, staying above the densest flak. Accuracy collapsed. Bombs skipped, tumbled, or detonated wide. The trade-off was always the same: safety or effectiveness. Never both. Sweat believed that choice was an illusion. He had watched enough missions to notice a pattern that statistics didn't capture. The pilots who survived weren't always the best flyers or the bravest. They were the ones the gunners lost, if only for a second. A hesitation in lead calculation. A moment of doubt in the tracking solution. The aircraft that lived were the ones that disrupted expectation. Confusion, Sweat decided, could be a weapon, not chaos. Chaos killed pilots just as reliably as it killed the enemy. What mattered was deliberate confusion, repeatable, controlled, mathematically predictable to the pilot and unreadable to the gunner. A descent path that changed vector often enough to break prediction without destroying bombing geometry. He worked it out on paper first. Angles, rates of descent, compass headings. Each turn displaced the aircraft just beyond where the gunner's math expected it to be. On paper, it worked. On paper, flak didn't explode and adrenaline didn't narrow vision. He took the idea to his flight leader. The answer was no. Not angry, not dismissive, just no. Doctrine existed for a reason. Experimental maneuvers got people killed. If Sweat wanted to survive longer, he should perfect fundamentals, smoother entries, tighter pullouts, cleaner aim. Sweat nodded, thanked him, and kept refining the numbers. The breakthrough came quietly. Late February. He sat on an ammunition crate watching crew chiefs patch 17 flak holes in a Dauntless that had limped back from WWII. Most of the damage clustered in the tail. Classic tracking fire. Walked up a predicted dive path. He redrew the descent. A standard dive was a straight line. Constant rate. Easy to solve. His dive was different. 4 discrete legs. Each 30 degrees off axis. Each held for 3 seconds. From the ground, the aircraft would appear to zigzag downward. From the cockpit, the vertical descent rate averaged out to match standard doctrine. Same release altitude. Same terminal angle. Same accuracy. Different geometry. He showed the sketch to his wingman before the next mission. The reaction was disbelief. Then concern. Then dismissal. Sweat would overstress the airframe. Lose situational awareness. Miss the target. Doctrine existed because smarter men had already tested everything else. Sweat asked one question. Had anyone actually tried it? No one answered. The mission that morning was routine. A supply depot on New Ireland's eastern coast. Moderate flak. Clear weather. The sort of target where quiet experimentation slipped through oversight. Sweat briefed a standard dive. Once airborne, alone at 8,500 feet with black bursts starting to bloom below, he made his choice. He rolled inverted. Pulled into a 70-degree dive. Then he turned. 3 seconds north. Airspeed building. Altimeter unwinding. Turn. 3 seconds east. Mild buffet as the dive steepened. Flak detonated behind him, where he had been. Turn. 3 seconds south. The target slid back into the sight. The math held. Turn. 3 seconds west. Final alignment. The target centered. He released at 2,000 feet and hauled back on the stick. 5.5 GS crushed him into the seat. Vision narrowed. The horizon snapped upright. Nothing followed him down. No smoke. No rattling shrapnel. No holes. On the way home, his wingman's voice crackled over the radio, tight with anger and awe. Asked what had happened. Asked if Sweat had taken a control hit. Sweat told him the truth. He had flown exactly the way he intended. By the time the Dauntless rolled to a stop on the Coral hardstand, the squadron already knew something had changed. Ground crews noticed what wasn't there. No damage. Not one hole. That evening, the squadron commander called Sweat in. Captain Eldridge listened without interruption as Sweat explained every turn, every second, every assumption. When he finished, Eldridge leaned back and told him the maneuver was dangerous, unauthorized, and possibly brilliant. He also told him he couldn't allow it yet. Standardization mattered. If every pilot invented his own solution, formations would collapse into chaos. But Eldridge was a pragmatist. One more test, he said. Hard target. Controlled conditions. If it worked again, if it was teachable, they would talk. If it failed, Sweat would return to doctrine. The target would be Rabaul. 5 days later, under low gray cloud and headwinds that made takeoff a struggle, 12 Dauntless lifted off toward Simpson Harbor. Sweat would fly third in the string, and the Flak would be waiting. By the time Sweat rolled in over Rabaul, the sky was already torn open. Black flak bursts hung at 6,000 feet like diseased clouds. Tracers climbed in lazy orange arcs from the ridgelines around Simpson Harbor. The gunners were awake, alert, experienced. This was the red zone, the place where perfect execution still got men killed. Sweat checked airspeed, checked altitude, rolled inverted. Then he counted. 3 seconds north. Flak detonated exactly where a normal dive would have placed him. Turn. 3 seconds east. The aircraft shuddered, but held. The target stayed in the sight. Turn. 3 seconds south. The bursts crept closer, adjusting to a solution that no longer existed. Turn. 3 seconds west. Final alignment. The fuel dump filled the glass. He released at 1,800 feet and pulled with everything the Dauntless had left. The GS crushed him down. Vision tunneled. The aircraft clawed back into level flight. Behind him, the fuel dump erupted into a rolling fireball that climbed higher than the palms. No hits. No holes. His wingmen followed him down, flying the same pattern, releasing on the same geometry. He came out clean as well. 2 aircraft that should have been shredded climbed back to 8,000 feet and turned for home. By the time they landed, 3 other pilots had already asked Captain Eldridge for permission to try the maneuver. Adoption was not immediate. It never is. The military does not embrace innovation. It dissects it, tests it, argues with it until the urgency that created it begins to fade. But war compresses time. Within 2 weeks, the 4-step dive was being demonstrated to flight leaders across VMSB 236. Within a month, it had spread to neighboring squadrons in the Solomons. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Bomber losses over heavily defended targets dropped by nearly 40% among pilots trained in the technique. Not a projection, not a theory. Aircraft that would have been written off as missing came back scorched but intact. Bunks stayed filled. Names stayed on rosters. After-action reports told the real story. Flak bursting seconds behind aircraft. Tracers curving toward empty air. The gunners were still skilled, but they were solving for a bomber that was never where it was supposed to be. Confusion had become armor. The 4-step dive was never a miracle. It didn't work everywhere. Against radar-directed guns, its advantage shrank. The best gunners adapted. But even then, it bought time. 1 second, 2 seconds. In a dive, that was the distance between fire and impact. Sweat flew 23 more combat missions using the pattern. He survived barrages that tore apart other aircraft in his flight. When asked how he did it, he never called it bravery or instinct. It's just geometry, he said, and moving faster than the math trying to kill you. After the war, the Dauntless became a museum artifact. The manuals were rewritten, then rewritten again. The 4-step dive dissolved into doctrine, its origin blurred by repetition and time. James Harlan Sweat went home, lived a quiet life, and rarely spoke about what he'd done. But the men who flew beside him remembered. They remembered that survival wasn't always luck. Sometimes it was observation, discipline, and the courage to question a rule written by men who hadn't faced the same sky. Because war doesn't reward elegance. It rewards results. And sometimes, results look like a dive bomber pulling out of a flak-filled sky, alive, because one pilot refused to accept that predictability was destiny.